I made this decision very deliberately, long before our relationship even began. I would not tell him what I truly did for a living. Not out of shame, but because I wanted to know who he really was before my title changed the room for him. My name is Joanna Berg. I'm 41 years old, and I'm the captain of a cargo ship that runs between Hamburg and Singapore. I'm responsible for a crew of 22 people and cargo worth several million euros per voyage. But when my then fiancé Matthias asked what I did for work, I simply said, I work in shipping. He nodded and never asked further. To him, that probably meant office work, logistics, maybe an assistant position at a port company. It meant no responsibility over human lives, no decisions during storms at sea, nothing that would impress him. And that's exactly what I wanted. For a while, this worked surprisingly well. He treated me kindly, but with a certain assumption that he was the more successful, more established partner in our relationship. He was a tax consultant at a mid-sized firm in Bremen, made good money, had his own office with his name on the door. He often talked about how structured and grounded his profession was, unlike mine, which he apparently imagined as chaotic and unimportant. When he finally invited me to dinner with his parents, he seemed almost relieved. They've wanted to meet you for a while, he said, smiling. But underneath his words lay something else, not curiosity, but an evaluation. His parents, Werner and Ingrid, welcomed us into a large, immaculately maintained house on the outskirts of Bremen. Everything felt deliberate, controlled, as if every object had to justify its place. Werner was a retired bank director. Ingrid had never worked, but she spoke about standards and etiquette as if those were her actual profession. Dinner started harmlessly. Questions about the drive, about the weather. Then the mood shifted. What exactly do you do in shipping? Werner asked, folding his hands calmly. The word exactly was chosen deliberately. I work on board, I answered, which was true, but not complete. He nodded, not quite convinced. There are many positions on board. Administration, logistics, basic crew work. That's true, I answered calmly. Ingrid smiled faintly, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. That sounds like very practical work, she said. Tiring, surely, but manageable. I let it stand. Throughout the entire dinner, this pattern repeated, questions that sounded neutral, but kept narrowing the space they were willing to give me in their minds. Matthias didn't seem to notice, or he considered it normal. At some point, Werner started talking about leadership and responsibility. Real leadership, he said, requires decades of experience. You don't achieve that at a young age, and certainly not doing basic work on a ship. I just nodded. There are moments when correction is worth less than silent observation. This was one of them. The evening continued, conversations grew more relaxed, but the underlying structure remained the same. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at it briefly. The name on the screen was enough to know it was important. Excuse me for a moment, I said, and stepped a few paces from the table. I took the call. My first officer was on the line, his voice tense. Captain, we have a problem with cargo securing in hold 3. We need your clearance for the rerouting. I'll look at the data right now, I said. Send me the reports. Understood, Captain. The word just hung in the air, loud enough that anyone listening closely couldn't miss it. When I turned back to the table, the atmosphere had already shifted. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Matthias looked at me with a completely new expression. Werner sat up straighter. Ingrid seemed more careful than before. For a moment, no one said anything. I sat back down. You never mentioned that, Matthias said finally. It didn't sound like an accusation, just a realization that had just caught up with him. You never asked, I answered. And that was the truth. Werner cleared his throat. Captain of a cargo ship. That's a very significant position. I nodded. It carries a lot of responsibility. The same word he himself had used minutes earlier suddenly carried a completely different meaning. No one brought up the earlier assumptions again. They didn't need to. Their effect had already taken hold. The rest of the evening was noticeably more careful, with more attention paid to what I said. As we left the house, the air outside felt freer. We walked a few steps in silence. Then Matthias said quietly, I didn't know that. I know. Why didn't you tell me? I thought about it for a moment, because I wanted to see what existed between us when my title played no role. Because I wanted to know how you'd treat me if you believed I was less than you. He didn't argue. In the following months, something changed between us, but not the way I had hoped. Matthias started making small remarks about how proud he was of me, in front of colleagues, in front of strangers. But I noticed his pride had more to do with my title than with me. He told others about my fiancé, the captain, with a tone that showed me he now had something to show off with. I realized nothing fundamental had changed. Before, he had underestimated me because he thought I was less. Now he treated me differently because he thought I was a status symbol. Neither had anything to do with me. 6 months later, I ended the engagement. Not because of a single fight, but because I understood that real affection shouldn't depend on a title, positively or negatively. Werner and Ingrid never learned why I left their son. Maybe they still think I was simply a difficult, career-obsessed woman. The truth is simpler. I wanted someone who saw me before he saw my rank. And once it became clear no one in that family was capable of that, I knew I had to move on. Today, I still command my ship, with the same calm authority I had that evening on the phone. And I've learned that the people who underestimate you first and then only admire you for your success were never really interested in you, only in what you represent. That's my story. A title, a dinner, and a family that only understood who was sitting at their table because of a single phone call. If this story reminds you never to let others measure your worth by their assumptions, leave a comment below.